Welcome to The Claw. I'm Eric Holtzclaw, Chief Strategist at Liger. The Claw is the marketing podcast for C-suite executives. I'm joined today by Julian Reed. He is the founder of ActivEd. Julian, thanks so much for joining me.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about what ActivEd does.
ActivEd is a learning platform that uses physical activity to teach math, language arts, social studies, and science for elementary school kids. It's an active learning platform, a kinesthetic learning platform for really all students, but especially those kids who need to learn as they move. I was one of those kids who was always fidgeting, always moving, always getting in trouble. And we understand that the kinesthetic learning preference is one of the most overlooked in schools. And at the same time, kids aren't getting as much physical activity as they should. Child obesity epidemic continues to be a problem. So what ActivEd does allows teachers to teach what they're already doing, so it meets each state's standards, so no instruction time is lost. But it uses movement, the things that kids like to do already in elementary school, to teach those concepts.
Okay, very interesting. So we'll get more into how you got into that, but it reminds me of a time when my daughter was studying, and my wife called me and she said, my daughter's name's Caitlin. She was Caitlin then, she goes by Eve now. She said, Caitlin says that she wants to start listening to music while she's doing her math. And I think that's a terrible idea. Like, how can she do math and listen to music? And I said, you need to let her do it, because that's exactly what I do. Like, when I need to focus, I put on music, and that's the thing so understanding those things, as a parent or a person, that different people need different things. Because my wife, on the other hand, needs the house to be pristinely quiet. Literally nothing going on. But for some of us, it helps us, different ways of focusing. And I'm going to be interested about this because I often will get up and walk around when I'm trying to think about
absolutely.
And talk about something. So, yeah.
And actually with the music, art music and PE in elementary school work well together. There's a lot of data to support how music improves cognition.
So talk to me a little bit about how did you get into this? So what was the way that you decided to build this?
Yeah, so I'm a professor in the Department of Health Sciences at Furman University in Greenville, South Carolina. And so my area of research has been for the past, 25 years studying how physical activity improves the health of kids and adults. And then the last 20 or so, I've been focusing on how physical activity can improve behavior, cognition, and academic achievement of kids, knowing that kids don't get as much movement opportunities in school like we did when we were kids. And my wife's a classroom teacher. And so talking to her, decades ago about what's the best way to get more movement in schools. And she said, well, to really get more movement in schools, you got to find a way to integrate what you're doing with content that is already there, because teachers just don't have enough time to add anything. And so I started really looking into it at that point. I mean, we've known a sound body, sound mind, right? When you go back to philosophy hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago, if you will, but we haven't had a lot of empirical research on that until the 20th century. So we're getting more and more of that research, and it's demonstrating that movement is not just for your physical health, but it's really important for your brain health. And it all really started in the field of gerontology in the 1960s, when they started looking at the elderly and how to keep them really cognitively aware. And they found that the people who were moving more had more pruning. Pruning really meaning your neurons are regenerating and you're growing more synapses. And that's really how we communicate from a cognitive standpoint, right? One neuron sending a neurotransmitter to another neuron. And they found that these folks, as they were getting older, who were staying more active, had less cognitive decline. And so eventually just kind of made its way down through adults and children. And now there's quite a bit of evidence, widely accepted, nonpartisan, that kids who move more perform better academically, have less behavior management issues, less absenteeism, and that just healthy kids learn better. So I've been studying that for quite some time, written a few books as well as many research studies, and decided, hey, there are a lot of kids who were like me, but still a lot of kids out there who need to move as they learn. And what about creating a company with a product beyond just kind of paper to pencil lessons that I was doing for many years? And so that's really the impetus of ActivEd.
Okay, so tell me then. So tell me, how does it work? So how are you integrating moving into the learning process?
Absolutely. So our platform is all in the cloud, so there's no software to download. We have a couple characters, and they take kids on an adventure based on what you want to teach at that particular time. So let's say you're teaching first grade long and short vowel sounds. Each one of our walkabouts is roughly 7 to 10 minutes for pre-K through second grade, and they're about 3 minutes from third grade to fifth grade. And so we have a character. We don't know which character's coming up. Our platform is truly dynamic, although it plays like a video. It's not a video. It's all housed in the cloud. We have a couple patents as well. But a teacher goes into our dashboard, really simply says, okay, I want to teach first grade. I want to teach English language arts. I want to do reading foundation skills. And then all the lessons that meet that, you can select from. You pick long and short vowel sounds, and then a walkabout is created. And our character comes up, and basically for this one, long and short vowel sounds, it will tell the kids, hey, I want you to reach up for a long vowel sound, and I want you then to squat down for a short vowel sound. So that's showing on the screen. So right away, the kids are able to put it into a context. Okay, yep. Reaching up long, squatting down short. And a teacher right away has also an assessment. They can look at 25 kids in a classroom or 20 kids in a classroom and say, okay, those kids are getting it. These kids are not getting it. They're going to need some remediation. So depending on the content that you're teaching, we try to develop the movements to help to put that content into a context. So it's easier for the students to retain. And ultimately, that's what we're trying to get at, right? Kids are at school to learn. We should use as many different mediums to accomplish that. And physical activity is just one of them.
Very, very interesting. That's really cool. That's a cool concept. And I see so many connections and things that I've seen in the past, and how that can be really effective, not only in school, but in lots of different places to teach people.
Oh, absolutely. In business and what have you. I mean, you have some countries like Japan, for instance, a lot of their factories and some of their manual labor, they move in the morning to start their day. And they even do that in some of their white collar jobs as well, because they recognize if you're going to work, you're exercising your brain.
Right.
Why wouldn't you want your brain primed to be as optimal as possible? Well, when blood goes to the brain, it's not just bringing oxygen, it's bringing growth factors as well. And those growth factors over time leads to that neurogenesis. And that neurogenesis is developing more neurons. And the more neurons you have, the greater communication you have, just is going to improve cognition just based on that science.
Interesting. So I am curious about the decision to turn this into a business. I want to get into that, but
okay.
Just from is there a percentage? I'm just curious about, in the world of people who need to move around to think better, is it most people, or is that
Well, no, I mean, if you were to test everybody's learning preference, I think everyone would probably have a part of a kinesthetic, but depending on where you read, you're 20 to 25% of folks have some sort of kinesthetic preference. And then if you add in, kinesthetic visual, it goes up significantly more than that. I'm a kinesthetic visual. Now, there is criticisms
what is a kinesthetic visual?
Well, I'm a big visual learner. I need to see things, but I also then learn by doing.
Got it.
And so it really depends on the context. So if you were going to teach somebody how to use a computer, you wouldn't talk them through it, right? You'd say, all right, here's the computer, here's your keyboard, and this is how we're going to do it. Where some different tasks might not necessarily need a kinesthetic approach. But most of the research on learning does discuss about how you consume, the information. And oftentimes you really do need either a tactile, which is your fine motor, or more gross motor, to take that information from short-term memory to long-term memory, and ultimately to something we call long-term potentiation, when the neurons have a high affinity with one another. And I mean, just think about sports for a second. And I don't know if you played sports, but I played sports, and if you are practicing a skill, you don't learn it right away.
Right.
You have to continue and repeat, but eventually those motor units, which are within the muscles, basically recruiting muscle fibers, you get that sort of muscle memory by doing it over and over and over again.
The 10,000 hours. 10,000
yes,
hours.
exactly,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And I always say you can't cheat the process of learning, right? No matter how good I might be at golf, and I'm not very good, so I'm trying to give myself. But if I decide right now to go and play every day for the next 10 years, I'm probably still not going to be able to make the Champions Tour because although I play a bit, I didn't start early enough
Yeah.
to have those neurological pathways ingrained. So if you take that analogy and you start talking about just movement itself, well, the more you're moving, the more blood that's going to the brain. We're learning to that neurogenesis. Eventually, those neurons are really cooperating with one another and they're getting very specific, and you improve your cognition.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. So there's a leap between just writing about it, having taught it, thinking about it, and deciding to build a company around it. So what was why did you do that?
Why did I do that? I ask myself that all the time because, it's very difficult.
Yeah.
Well, I was doing a lot of workshops and I was training teachers all over the country, and they were continuously asking me for more content.
Okay.
And quite frankly, these teachers are way more creative than I am, but I was doing the workshops, trying to give them some content for them to be teaching, and they would ask for more. And then I would say, okay, maybe there's an opportunity to write a book here and so on. And then at the time in the early 2000s, I was also starting a family, and I realized, there's only one of me. Is there a way to scale this that would enable technology to play a much more of a role? And as you know, for schools in the late 1990s and early 2000s, the federal government and state government was pumping a lot more money into the technology in schools, not only with internet and broadband, but Promethean boards and smart boards and things like that. And those computers are obviously becoming ubiquitous. I thought there would be a real opportunity to be able to take this and be able to scale it out. So it's not just, one person doing a workshop for, a school district.
Okay, very cool. Well, we're going to take a commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to pick it up from there and talk about, so you got to build some things and get some people to buy it. So what did that look like? How's that journey been? So
sounds great.
You're listening to The Claw. I'm Eric Holtzclaw, Chief Strategist at Liger. The Claw is the marketing podcast for C-suite executives, and we'll be back in just a second. We're talking with Julian Reed. He is the founder of ActivEd.
The Claw podcast is brought to you by Liger. Liger is a hybrid marketing firm combining a brand strategy consultancy and a production house that offers the full range of content and creative services. We can be your entire marketing department or your entire marketing department's favorite people to work with. We save the world from boring, broken marketing by putting businesses in brand therapy so they can express their most authentic, memorable selves. And then we share their story so they can be known. For more information, visit ligerpartners.com and follow us on our social media platforms.
And we're back. You're listening to The Claw. I'm Eric Holtzclaw, Chief Strategist at Liger. The Claw is the marketing podcast for C-suite executives. I'm talking today with Julian Reed. He is the founder of ActivEd. So, Julian, you decided that you needed to replicate yourself and technology might be the way to do it. Did you sit down and start programming, or did you have to find a person, or how did that work?
Yeah, I definitely did not sit down and start programming. So interestingly, prior to even really starting the company, I was at my neighborhood pool and I ended up talking to somebody, and he was in marketing, and I was telling him about my book and what I was doing. And we were thinking about ways to market the book more. And he ended up talking about how his children had dysgraphia, and they did a lot of kinesthetic tutoring and what have you to pick up these concepts. And so right away we had a kinship, because I also have a reading comprehension learning disability. And so we were talking about these things and saying, hey, this would be really cool if we could work together and also maybe help our kids. Well, learning how long it takes to build a business and getting things, by the time our kids were able to use this content, they were beyond elementary school. But fortunately, my co-founder, his name's Matt Farabee, and he runs a pretty large advertising and marketing firm in Greenville. He had some tech background, and he understood enough to ask the right questions. But so as we started that, we also then there were some incubators in Greenville, and we approached a few people, and they said, "Hey, you need to go talk to this person. You need to go talk to this person," and we started doing that, and we ended up getting some people to say, "Okay, I can help you build a a a document that would eventually lead to an MVP, right? The minimal viable product." And so we each put in a little bit of our own money at the time, and then there was a third person, part of our team, who has a background in private equity and venture capital, and so he was kind of helping us get a roadmap of like where we're going to be after we do this, and so we started going, okay, how do we raise some additional money? And as most startups, you do a friend and family round, and so we did a friend and family, convertible note round and raised some money. And as we were doing that, my the person who has that experience in private equity and venture capital was working with a developer on a project for Crayola.
Okay.
And he's like, hey, this is something this guy might be interested in, or he at the very least could be a sounding board. Why don't we set up a call and talk to him? And we started talking, and he says, yeah, this is something I think I can help you with, and kind of went from there. It was very serendipitous, but it actually ended up really being helpful, because one, this person was also overseas, where there was a little bit more affordable on how to build the platform. In our platform, we use a lot of motion capture, mocap, which is very expensive to produce. Yeah. And so it's really high quality 3D, but to do that stateside was really cost prohibitive. So initially in the MVP, we realized if we're going to build enough content, we need to raise money even beyond the friends and family round. And so as we were building more content, we went from friends and family to then, at the time, it was called UCAN, the Upstate Carolina Angel Network, which eventually then rebranded to Venture South. So we went to Venture South, and we did our preliminary, meeting, and they said, hey, this might be something that the membership would be interested in. And so we pitched in front of them, and we got our initial tranche from them, and then that was somewhat matched by SC Launch, which is South Carolina Launch, which is part of the South Carolina Research Authority. So we started using network and funders, whether they were individual high net worth funders, which we had some of those in Greenville, or they came through Venture South, or they came through SCRA.
Nice. And so so is the product is in market today? We've been in the market for about 6 years. Nice.
We've been very successful with state contracts.
Okay. I was going to ask if you went in at like the teacher level, school level.
Yeah. So okay. So we started at the teacher and the district level, but we raised a little bit of money, but we didn't raise a ton of money to build out a multi-layered sales team and what have you. So we started with kind of the low-hanging fruit of commission-based independent representatives, or independent contractors that kind of carry a variety of products. But we soon learned they carry a variety of products, so you're not always going to be the top of mind. And then we decided, okay, we need to probably raise a little bit more money so we can put additional money into sales and marketing. And during that time, we were introduced to some state folks at the government level saying, hey, this might be interesting. Have you thought about going to state legislatures or governor's offices and looking to those budgets? And so we started doing that in South Carolina. and we got funded for about 5 years in South Carolina.
Nice.
And then we got funded in Mississippi, and we've been funded in Virginia. And now, we have some contracts in Minnesota and Michigan, and we still sell directly to school, a DTC, direct to consumer, individual teacher, and we do districts, but we've been probably the most successful at the top down, going to
one to many. One to many approach. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then what does the future look like? What do you?
So the future looks like for us, we just built some additional content in some of the higher grades, and we're also focusing on content related to test prep. Like, a lot of kids in elementary school have no idea even how to fill out the bubbles and how to prepare for standardized testing. So we're trying to do some kinesthetic activities with that. We're trying to focus on some anti-bullying content, some resiliency, character, education content. So beyond just going into, the traditional math, language, art, social studies, and science, and focusing also on, mental health and what have you. So that's part of our roadmap as well.
You need to look into, we have to take these like security classes internally. So maybe if it had a kinetic element to it, I'd be a little more.
Well, it's funny you say that, because my co-founder talked about doing that early on when you get on an airplane and they talk to you about putting on the mask.
Yeah.
Right. And because we have a player in which you can put different content in, and we would probably have to modify it a little bit, but we thought about going out into the business world for trainings and saying, hey, we have a player, because our player changes things, so it's not the same stuff. Maybe you can input some of that information into the player. And it's funny you mentioned the cybersecurity, because I have to do one shortly for the university.
I've got 3 days left, I think, to get mine.
Yes, done, so right. I always wait till the end.
Well, but it's been a pleasure talking to you. I learned something today. It was very, very interesting. I feel like I learned something about myself, maybe. So, so good.
Well, you learned you benefit from moving around.
I do. So, yeah, that's why I'm always like, how do I not be the person who has to sit down during the entire session?
Well, I enjoyed this a lot too, and I enjoy talking to different folks and letting them know a little bit about what we do, because almost always someone will be like, I like to walk around. I get my best ideas when I'm walking or exercising, and well, there's science behind that. And I always try to tell people, well, ask yourself, why is that occurring? And there is empirical evidence to support it.
Well, it's what's funny is that the human brain will often tell you, it's like, just sit there, just sleep, just whatever, and you need to do the exact opposite. Like
exactly
do something. And yeah, it's really interesting. Well, thank you so much for joining me. So how do people go and get information or learn more about your organization?
You can go to walkabouts.com or ActivEd, just in Google, and that will pull right up. And you can follow me on X at Dr. Julian Reed, or at Get Walkabouts, and you can find me on LinkedIn and all the different social platforms.
Well, thank you very much. Well, good luck with it, and it's been a pleasure having you on.
So, thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, so you've been listening to The Claw. This is Eric Holtzclaw, Chief Strategist at Liger. The Claw is the marketing podcast for C-suite executives, and we've been talking today with Julian Reed, founder of ActivEd. We will put all of his information in the show notes, and thanks for tuning in.